Hello, welcome back to Urban X Files. My name is Keith, and today I'm going to relay another spooky story. Although Halloween is now past, this story takes us back to Halloween in the 1980s. One evening, there was a student who was studying something in a university in Liverpool, and one day she decided to go out for a drink. As Liverpool city centre is full of students, there is no shortage of places to go visit. So she chose one of the local pubs, drinking houses near the student accommodation. So she ordered a drink and some snacks and went and sat down with some friends, listening to the various jukebox music. And she happened to be drinking his sorrows, for she'd recently fell out with one of her close friends. So after drinking and eating her sorrows away, she bumped into an old friend. This old friend was a bit of a romantic partner. So they sat down and chatted until the night closed in. Now, we'll give him the name of Fred. Fred was in his 20s and he was an apprentice joiner. And he worked in a local bedroom design shop in Liverpool, and they would often go out canvassing and different things, and he was handing out leaflets while in the city centre of Liverpool, giving out the leaflets that sort of like typical leaflets that are given out in advertising his business or the business he worked for. Arranged to meet each other again through having really reconnected that night after she was drinking his sorrows. So Fred and Jane arranged to meet up again. This time they decided to bring a friend each, so it turned into a double date. Another night went by and they arranged to meet up and went out for a few drinks. The girls Jane and Jill had been waiting in one of the local clubs for a while and thought that the guys had decided not to show. Now this is back before mobile phones was a thing. So after the girls started dancing, the two boys, Fred and Bernie, turned up, and the pair of them were both elated to see that both of their dates were still at the venue. So they apologised profusely for being late and had a very valid excuse, so they said. So they both went down and sat down and decided to go and have something to eat. So off they went to a restaurant, and they sat down at the table and started to chat away about old times, things they'd been up to and what has gone on in each other's lives. And one of Fred's other friends happened to be in this restaurant with his girlfriend, so they joined the foursome and decided to have a nice meal together and enjoy this Saturday night. Now, the conversation then took a turn where they started speaking about spooky things and things that go bump into the night. And one of the guys that was sat at the table was very much into all things that go bump into the night and started giving off various stories that he knew. He said that Halloween was specific time of year where the ghosts are able to cross into our world a lot easier, for the veil is thinner. And he said that one of his friends had been practicing the Ouija board, and she lived in America, and that when she was doing the Ouija board, she found that she wanted to get the spirits to help guide her at this time of life because she was having a really tough time. And she sat down and had the Ouija board go off with her friend. Now the Ouija board strangely spelt out her name. They thought, this is a bit strange, so they continued doing what they were doing, and it suggested afterwards that the answer to a question was death. And the sad story is that she either believed that that was the only way out through the spirits on the Ouija board had said death. She took her own life. And this turned into a bit of a sort of sour disagreement on the table with their friends, as one of the guys at the table didn't believe his story and said that's a complete lie. And they continued talking on the paranormal, and one of them said, if you're up to it, I know where there is an abandoned house, and this abandoned house has some weird creepy in the basement. So he said, I'd take you to this place if you want to see it. It's very creepy. There's supposed to be all kinds of like weird things locked in the basement, and one of our friends said he'd seen a coffin in the basement with all kinds of weird, like, occult paraphernalia. The guy who first met his old friend Jane and wanted to go on this date, and it ended up being a foursome and then a sixthsome. That's even a thing. And he was getting a bit agitated now, probably because he was more scared, but he didn't want to come across that way in front of his old flame. So he said, I've had enough of this. You are full of shizzle. I want you to take me to this place and show me. I do not believe a word you're saying. So they said, right, that's it. They shook hands, they made a bet, and off they went in search of this abandoned house. So they shook hands, made the bet, and paid for their food at this restaurant. And they left, and they took a walk down the dimly lit streets towards this abandoned house. As they walked down this dark road, there stood the house in which was said to house this creepy basement. It looked very creepy outside, something you would typically see on a horror film. So they stood outside and talked about which way in they were going to go, and the 6 people then climbed over the fence and went to find a way in. Now, they tried all the obvious ways, the front windows, the front door. They didn't get in. And then they found an entryway in through the side of the house. So they crawled through all of the brambles and overgrown garden. As they crawled through, they got into the property. They had to make one of them had a keyring torch, so he put his little torch on and had a little search of the property to make sure that nobody was in the house, no like homeless or vagrants or anything. So they checked all around and they couldn't find anybody that was there. So they shouted out, nobody answered. So the 6 people then followed the guy with the torch, and they found the entrance to the basement. So they went down each of the steps slowly. They found their way onto the floor of the basement. And there, to their surprise, was this coffin. The coffin was just propped and left. So, as they stood there in disbelief, the guy with the torch went over to the coffin, shined his torch on it, and said, "You owe me some money." And Fred didn't like his attitude and said, "Right, let's go. We've seen it. Yeah, okay." He said, No. I want to prove that this place is haunted." So he then asked if there was any spirits present to make themselves known. He mocked the spirits as he was making these suggestions and enticing them. And outside it was starting to rain, so they could hear the rain come down and hit the roof of they had like a tin roof protecting one part of the thing, so they could hear that as the rain was pitting down onto it. They went over to the coffin. One of them began to look for a way to open the coffin lid to see what was inside. Now the girls obviously didn't want anything to do with it. They were absolutely terrified. So Fred was beginning to get a little bit anxious now, and this showed in his voice and his trembling hands. Obviously the guy with the torch was laughing because he wasn't scared. He didn't think there was anything there that was going on, and he knew he'd made he'd won the bet and didn't look like a wimp. Now obviously Fred and his friend wanted to leave there and then. The torch was weakening. They managed to find something they could use to set on fire. So they found all old papers and different things that was in the basement and wrapped it up and set it on fire to sort of make it a little bit visible and warm, to take this creepy feeling away to it. And as he was stood over the coffin with this, there was a gust of wind that come from nowhere and blew out the flames. And they lifted he managed to lift the lid, which showed another lid, and the lid that was underneath was like a transparent thing. And he dropped the torch because he wasn't expecting to see anything in this coffin, but there, to the surprise, was the face of a girl. And as they all gasped in horror, they looked at this face in the coffin and they screamed as each of the girls were seeing themselves in this coffin. The guys couldn't see anything and was like, "What's going on?" But the girls were screaming because they could see in the glass that was covering the coffin was a picture or a vision of themselves. And then that caused the girls to scream even more and leave. So they dashed up the stairs, out of the basement, and out into the night, into the pouring down rain. And then they all left. They put the lid back on the coffin and left. And a week had gone by and they hadn't spoken. What happened next was something that was pretty sad. Is that one of the girls who'd screamed, who'd said she'd seen her own face in this coffin had sadly died in a car accident. So did she witness her own death and see her own face in this coffin? So what was this coffin? Was this a way the spirits that they'd mocked that night getting their own vengeance on them? Was this some sort of coincidence or just something that happened? Nobody will know. But I just think this serves as a good reminder to those who do go to these places, who do find coffins. Do not make a mockery of them, whether they're in a basement or whether they're in a church crypt. If you find bones and different things, leave them be and show respect. For you never know, they might just have a curse. Take care and see you in the next video.